Captain Marcus had seen many strange things during his 5 years aboard the merchant vessel Wandering Star, but nothing quite prepared him for what he found in the slave markets of Kethvar Prime. The smell of unwashed bodies and fear hung thick in the recycled air as he walked past cage after cage of captured beings from across the galaxy. He wasn't here by choice. The Wandering Star needed repairs, and Kethvar Prime was the only port within 3 parsecs that could handle their damaged hyperdrive. Unfortunately, it was also a haven for slavers, pirates, and the worst scum the galaxy had to offer. Marcus kept his head down and his hand near his plasma pistol as he made his way through the market, trying to reach the parts dealer on the far side. That's when he saw her. She sat in a cage barely large enough for a human child, her knees drawn up to her chest. At first glance, she appeared to be nothing more than a fragile slip of a girl, pale blue skin that seemed almost translucent, silver hair that caught the harsh market lights, and large violet eyes that stared out with a mixture of defiance and despair. She couldn't have been more than 5 feet tall, and her limbs were so thin that Marcus wondered how she could even support her own weight. The Kethvarian slave trader noticed Marcus's gaze and immediately launched into his sales pitch. "Ah, you have excellent taste, human. This is a rare specimen, an ethereal from the Andromeda spiral. Very exotic, very beautiful. Perfect for entertainment purposes." The trader's multiple eyes glinted with greed as he named an astronomical price. Marcus felt his stomach turn. He'd heard of the ethereals, an ancient race that supposedly possessed incredible psychic abilities but had been nearly extinct for centuries. Most scholars believed they were nothing more than legend. Yet here was living proof, reduced to merchandise in a filthy cage. "She doesn't look like much," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice casual while his mind raced. "Seems half dead already." The trader laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Appearances deceive with ethereals. This one has unusual heritage. Very powerful bloodline. But she has been difficult. Refuses to submit properly. Perhaps a strong human hand could break her spirit, yes?" Marcus watched as the girl's violet eyes fixed on him with startling intensity. For a moment, he felt something brush against the edges of his mind, not invasive, but questioning. It was gone before he could be sure it had happened at all. "I'll take her," he said, pulling out his credit chip before his rational mind could stop him. The transaction was completed quickly. The trader seemed eager to be rid of his difficult merchandise. Marcus found himself the owner of what appeared to be the most fragile being he'd ever encountered. As the energy restraints were removed from her wrists and ankles, she stumbled slightly before catching herself with fluid grace that seemed at odds with her apparent frailty. "What's your name?" Marcus asked gently as they walked away from the market. She was silent for a long moment, those large violet eyes studying him intently. When she finally spoke, her voice was like music, soft and melodic, but with undertones that seemed to resonate in his very bones. "I am called Lyralii. I am the last daughter of House Veltar of the Ethereal Dominion." She paused, tilting her head slightly. "You did not purchase me for the usual reasons." "Why?" Marcus felt heat rise to his cheeks. "Because no one should be in a cage. And because..." He stopped, unsure how to explain the strange compulsion he'd felt to help her. "Because you sense what others do not," Lyralii finished quietly. "You are not like other humans I have encountered." They made their way back to the Wandering Star, drawing curious and sometimes hostile looks from other marketgoers. Marcus's ship was old but well-maintained, a mid-range cargo hauler that had seen better decades but was still spaceworthy. His crew of 6 looked up in surprise as he boarded with an unexpected passenger. "Captain," asked Zara, his Centaurian first mate. "What's this then?" "We have a new passenger," Marcus announced. "Lyralii, these are my crew. Zara's my first mate, Rodriguez handles engineering, Thompson's our pilot, Singh manages communications, Nakamura's our medic, and Williams handles weapons systems." The crew exchanged glances. They'd all served together long enough to trust Marcus's judgment, but bringing an unknown alien aboard, especially one purchased from slavers, was unusual even for him. Dr. Nakamura stepped forward, her medical scanner already in hand. "She looks malnourished and exhausted." Let me run some scans. No, Lyralii said firmly, and, suddenly, the air around her seemed to shimmer. I require no medical attention. I am more resilient than I appear. Marcus felt that strange mental brush again, and, this time he was certain it came from Lyralii. But, it wasn't threatening, more like she was testing something, searching for something in his mind. Right, he said slowly. Zara, set up quarters for our guest. The VIP cabin should do. As the crew dispersed to their duties, Marcus found himself alone with Lyralii in the ship's small common area. She moved to the viewport and stared out at the sprawling cityscape of Kethvar Prime below. You are wondering what you have gotten yourself into, she observed without turning around. You sense that I am not what I seem, yet you cannot quite grasp what that means. I've learned to trust my instincts, Marcus replied. Right now, they're telling me that helping you was the right thing to do, even if I don't understand why. Lyralii turned, and, for a moment her violet eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. Your instincts serve you well, Marcus Chen. Tell me, what do you know of the ethereal wars? Marcus searched his memory. Not much. Ancient history, mostly considered mythology. Supposedly, your people once ruled a vast empire before disappearing. Most historians think it's just legend. A sad smile crossed Lyralii's delicate features. Not legend. History that has been edited by those who conquered us. The ethereal dominion was indeed vast, spanning 3 galaxies at its height. We were explorers, scientists, philosophers. We sought to bring peace and understanding to the cosmos. She moved away from the viewport, her movements graceful despite her apparent fragility. But, power corrupts, even among the most noble. A faction of our people sought to impose peace through domination, using our psychic abilities to control other species rather than guide them. This led to civil war, and, in our weakness, our enemies struck. Marcus listened intently as Lyralii continued her story. The hegemony, a coalition of the galaxy's most aggressive species, saw their chance. They had developed technology specifically designed to counter our abilities. Psychic dampeners, mental shields, weapons that could disrupt our very essence. The war lasted centuries, and, in the end, my people were scattered to the far corners of the universe. But, you survived, Marcus pointed out. Some did. Hidden colonies, secret enclaves, individuals like myself who carry the bloodline forward. Her expression hardened. The hegemony believes they exterminated us all. They have grown complacent in their dominance, oppressing countless species across the galaxy. What they do not know is that we have been watching, waiting, preparing. A chill ran down Marcus's spine. Preparing for what? Before Lyralii could answer, the ship's communication system crackled to life. Singh's voice came through the speakers with barely controlled panic. Captain! We've got a problem. Hegemony fleet dropping out of hyperspace looks like a full battle group. Marcus rushed to the bridge, Lyralii following close behind. Through the main view screen, they could see the massive angular shapes of hegemony warships taking up positions around Kethvar Prime. The sight made Marcus's blood run cold. He'd encountered hegemony forces before, and it never ended well for anyone involved. What are their intentions? Marcus asked. Thompson, their pilot, looked up from his console with worry etched on his face. They're broadcasting on all frequencies, Captain. Apparently, they're conducting a security sweep of the system. All ships are to submit to boarding and inspection. Marcus cursed under his breath. The Wandering Star had nothing illegal aboard, at least, nothing that should interest the hegemony, but these inspections were notorious for finding excuses to impound ships and arrest crews. Can we run? He asked. Rodriguez shook her head. Hyperdrive's still down for repairs. We're sitting ducks. They are not here by coincidence, Lyralii said quietly from behind Marcus. Her voice was calm, but he could sense tension radiating from her small frame. They have detected something. Or someone. Marcus turned to look at her, understanding beginning to dawn. They're looking for you. Lyralii nodded gravely. For centuries, the hegemony has maintained psychic sensors throughout their territory, designed to detect any trace of ethereal presence. My capture and transport to the slave markets must have triggered their alert systems. The communication console chimed with an incoming transmission. On the screen appeared the brutal features of a hegemony commander: thick gray skin, forearms, and eyes like burning coals. This was Acrothan, one of the hegemony's most aggressive member species. "Attention all vessels," the commander growled. "I am War Commander Thacklon of the Hegemony First Fleet. We are conducting a security operation to locate and destroy any remaining ethereal terrorists. All ships will submit to immediate boarding or be destroyed. This is not a request." The transmission cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. Marcus looked around at his crew. They were good people who didn't deserve to be caught up in an ancient war they knew nothing about. "I should surrender myself," Lyrelii said softly. "Your people do not deserve to suffer for harboring me." "Like hell," Marcus replied immediately. "No one on my ship gets handed over to those butchers." Williams looked up from the weapons console. "Captain, with all due respect, we've got a cargo hauler with basic defensive systems. They've got a full battle group. This isn't exactly a fair fight." Marcus was about to respond when alarms began blaring throughout the ship. On the tactical display, they could see several Hegemony assault shuttles detaching from the nearest warship, heading directly for the Wandering Star. "Incoming boarding craft," Zara reported. "They're not waiting for our cooperation." Marcus's mind raced through their limited options. They couldn't fight, they couldn't run, and they couldn't hide. But, as he looked at Lyrelii's delicate form, something deep in his gut told him that appearances were about to prove very deceiving indeed. "Lyrelii," he said urgently. "Is there anything you haven't told me? Anything that might help us get out of this?" She was silent for a long moment, her violet eyes distant as if listening to something only she could hear. When she finally looked back at Marcus, there was something different about her, a sense of power barely contained beneath her fragile exterior. "There is much I have not told you," she admitted. "But, Marcus Chen, if you choose to stand with me now, there will be no going back. Your life, and the lives of your crew, will be forever changed." The boarding craft were rapidly approaching. Marcus could hear the heavy footsteps of his crew as they took defensive positions throughout the ship. In moments, they would be boarded by Hegemony forces who would show no mercy to anyone harboring an ethereal. "I'm already in this," Marcus said firmly. "We all are. So whatever you can do, now would be a good time." Lyrelii nodded slowly, and, suddenly, the air around her began to shimmer and distort. Her apparent frailty seemed to fall away like a discarded cloak, revealing something far more substantial beneath. Her violet eyes began to glow with an inner fire, and, when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate through the very structure of the ship. "Very well," she said, and her words carried the weight of destiny. "Then, let the galaxy learn that the ethereals have not forgotten how to fight." The first boarding clamps attached to the Wandering Star's hull with a reverberating clang that echoed throughout the ship. Marcus gripped his plasma pistol tighter, knowing it would be useless against Hegemony assault troops but needing something solid in his hands. "Positions, everyone," he called over the comms system. "Remember, we're fighting for our lives here." But, as he looked at Lyrelii, now radiating an aura of barely contained power, Marcus began to suspect that they weren't the ones who should be afraid. The first Hegemony assault troops came through the Wandering Star's airlock with the confidence of predators who had never known defeat. Their powered armor was black as the void of space, each suit standing nearly 8 feet tall and bristling with weapons. Marcus had seen these soldiers in action before. They were efficient, ruthless, and utterly without mercy. What they encountered in the cargo bay was not what they expected. Lyrelii stood alone in the center of the space, no longer the fragile slip of a girl Marcus had rescued from the slave market. She had somehow grown in presence, though her physical form remained unchanged. The air around her rippled like heat waves, and her violet eyes blazed with an intensity that made the assault troops' helmet displays flicker and distort. "Ethereal confirmed," the lead trooper barked into his comm system. "Prepare for immediate termination." They raised their weapons in unison, finger on triggers ready to reduce Lyrelii to atoms with their plasma rifles. But, as they fired, something impossible happened. The energy beams simply stopped. They hung suspended in the air around Lyrelii like frozen lightning, creating a spectacular light show that cast dancing shadows on the cargo bay walls. "Impossible," breathed the squad leader. "Psychic dampeners are at full power." She shouldn't be able to. Dash's words were cut off as Lyralii raised one delicate hand. The suspended energy beams suddenly reversed direction, slamming back into the assault troops with 10 times their original force. Armor that was designed to withstand anti-ship weapons crumpled like paper. Bodies that had been enhanced with military-grade augmentations were flung across the cargo bay like toys. In seconds, the entire assault squad was down. Marcus and his crew watched in stunned silence from their defensive positions. They had prepared for a desperate firefight against overwhelming odds. Instead, they witnessed something that defied every law of physics they thought they knew. "By the stars," whispered Dr. Nakamura. "What is she?" Lyralii turned toward them, and Marcus saw something in her expression that chilled him more than the violence they had just witnessed. There was sadness there, and regret, but also a terrible sense of purpose. "I am what remains of an empire that once spanned 3 galaxies," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that seemed to speak directly to their souls. "I am the last princess of House Veltar, keeper of the ancient ways, and bearer of the crown of stars. And I am very, very tired of hiding." More alarm klaxons began sounding throughout the ship. On the bridge displays, they could see additional assault shuttles launching from the hegemony warships. Whatever psychic dampening technology they had been using was clearly inadequate against Lyralii's true power. "Captain Chen," she continued, fixing Marcus with those blazing violet eyes, "I offer you and your crew a choice. Abandon ship now, take one of the shuttles, and flee this system. I will ensure the hegemony forces are too distracted to pursue you. You can return to your previous life and forget you ever met me." Marcus found his voice, though his throat felt dry as sand. "What's the alternative?" Lyralii's expression grew even more serious. "Stand with me, and help me reclaim what was stolen from my people. But know that if you choose this path, you will be marked as enemies of the hegemony. There will be no safe ports, no neutral territories. You will be hunted across the galaxy until the day you die." The bridge fell silent except for the continued sounds of alarm klaxons and approaching enemy forces. Marcus looked around at his crew, these people who had followed him through asteroid fields and pirate attacks, who had become more like family than employees over the years. Zara was the first to speak. "Captain, I've been running from something my whole life. Maybe it's time I ran towards something instead." Rodriguez nodded grimly. "My home colony was glassed by the hegemony when I was a kid. They called it a police action. I've got some debts to settle." One by one, each crew member voiced their agreement. Thompson, Singh, Nakamura, Williams, they had all suffered under the hegemony's oppressive rule in one way or another. The chance to strike back, no matter how impossible it seemed, was too tempting to pass up. Marcus felt a surge of pride in his people, followed immediately by terror at what he was committing them to. "All right then," he said finally. "We're in. But I have one condition." Lyralii raised an eyebrow, an expression that managed to be both regal and amused. "You are in no position to make demands, Captain." "Maybe not," Marcus admitted. "But I need to know what's the real plan here." "Because as impressive as your powers are, one person can't overthrow a galactic empire, no matter how strong they are." For the first time since revealing her true nature, Lyralii smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Who said I was only one person?" Before Marcus could ask what she meant, Lyralii closed her eyes and raised both hands toward the ceiling. The air around her began to vibrate with a frequency that was felt more than heard. Marcus realized she was broadcasting something, a signal that reached far beyond the confines of their small ship. "I am Lyralii Veltar, heir to the Starlight Throne, and I call upon the scattered children of the ethereal dominion. Too long have we hidden in shadows while our enemies grew fat on conquest. Too long have we allowed the galaxy to suffer under their tyranny. The time of hiding is over. The time of reckoning has come." Her words seemed to echo not just through the ship, but through space itself. And, incredibly, impossibly, they received answers. The first response came from the edge of the system, a massive vessel that simply materialized out of nowhere, as if it had been invisible until that moment. It was unlike any ship design Marcus had ever seen, all flowing curves and crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them. The wandering star's sensors barely detected it, even though it was larger than the Hegemony flagship. More ships appeared throughout the system. Dozens, then hundreds. They materialized from behind moons and asteroids, decloaked from interdimensional hiding spots, emerged from what appeared to be empty space. Each vessel was unique in design but unmistakably alien, bearing no resemblance to the brutal angular lines of Hegemony ships or the practical functionality of human craft. The Hegemony fleet, which had seemed so overwhelmingly powerful just moments before, suddenly found itself outnumbered 10-1. Impossible, came War Commander Theclon's voice over the communication channels. Our sensors showed no fleet movements. Where did they come from? Lyralii opened her eyes, and Marcus saw that they now glowed like miniature stars. We have been here all along, War Commander. Watching. Waiting. Learning your weaknesses. On the tactical display, they could see the Hegemony ships frantically trying to reorganize their formation. Several were already attempting to flee, but found their hyperdrives mysteriously non-functional. The ethereal ships moved with grace and purpose, surrounding the invaders like a closing fist. You spoke of destroying ethereal terrorists, Lyralii continued, her voice now broadcasting on all frequencies throughout the system. Let me correct your misconception. We are not terrorists. We are the rightful rulers of this galaxy, and we have returned to reclaim what was stolen from us. The first shots of the battle came from the Hegemony flagship, massive particle beams that could punch through the armor of a battle station. They struck one of the nearer ethereal vessels dead on, and simply disappeared, absorbed by what appeared to be a shimmering energy field that surrounded the alien ship. The ethereal response was swift and devastating. Beams of pure coherent thought lanced out from their vessels, passing through the Hegemony ship's shields as if they didn't exist. Where these beams struck, enemy ships simply stopped. Their lights went dark, their engines cut out, and their weapons fell silent. Psychic warfare, Dr. Nakamura breathed. They're not destroying the ships, they're shutting down the cruise mines. Within minutes, the entire Hegemony battle group had been neutralized without a single vessel being destroyed. The enemy ships floated helpless in space, their crews alive but unconscious, their technology intact but useless without minds to operate it. Marcus found himself staring in awe at the display of power. This wasn't just advanced technology, this was something beyond anything he had ever imagined possible. How, he asked Lyralii. How many of your people are left? How have you kept this hidden for so long? Lyralii moved to the viewport, gazing out at the fleet of vessels that had seemingly appeared from nowhere. We are not as numerous as we once were, she admitted. Perhaps 50,000 survivors scattered across the galaxy. But we have had centuries to prepare, to plan, to develop new techniques and technologies. The Hegemony believes they won the war through superior firepower and psychic dampening technology. They are correct, they did win. But they made one crucial mistake. What's that? Marcus asked, though part of him was afraid to hear the answer. They allowed some of us to survive, Lyralii said, her voice carrying undertones of steel. And we have spent every day since then, preparing for this moment. The Hegemony conquered us through brute force and technology designed to counter our natural abilities. So we evolved beyond those abilities. We developed new powers, new techniques that their dampeners cannot touch. She turned back to face Marcus and his crew, and her expression was no longer that of the fragile slave girl he had rescued. This was the face of royalty, of power, of someone accustomed to command. Captain Chen, she said formally. You and your crew have chosen to stand with us at a crucial moment in galactic history. Your ship will be the first human vessel to join the ethereal restoration fleet. But, I must warn you, the war that begins today will not be won quickly or easily. The Hegemony controls thousands of systems and commands millions of ships. Even with our advantages, victory is far from certain. Marcus looked around at his crew, seeing determination mixed with terror on their faces. They had all seen what the Hegemony was capable of, had all suffered under their rule in various ways. But they had also just witnessed power beyond their wildest dreams. What do you need us to do? He asked simply. Lyralii's smile returned, warmer this time. For now, observe and learn. Your ship will accompany the fleet as we begin reclaiming ethereal territory. But, more importantly, you will serve as our ambassadors to humanity. The hegemony rules through fear and intimidation, but they are vulnerable to something they have never truly encountered before. Which is hope, Lyrelii said. For centuries, the oppressed species of this galaxy have lived without hope of freedom. They have accepted their servitude because they saw no alternative. But, when word spreads that the ethereals have returned, that there is a force capable of standing against the hegemony. She gestured toward the viewport, where the captured hegemony ships were being surrounded by ethereal vessels. Revolution will spread like wildfire across the galaxy. And humans, with their talent for inspiring others and their reputation for stubborn defiance, will be crucial in fanning those flames. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as the full implications of what they were embarking upon sank in. They weren't just joining a rebellion, they were helping to start a galactic revolution that would reshape the balance of power throughout the known universe. "There's one thing I need to know," he said. "Why me? Why my ship? There are thousands of human vessels throughout the galaxy, many with better weapons and more experienced crews. Why did fate put me in that slave market today?" Lyrelii studied him for a long moment, those violet eyes seeming to look directly into his soul. "Fate had nothing to do with it, Marcus Chen. I have been watching human activities throughout this sector for months, searching for the right person at the right moment. You were chosen because your actions have shown you to be exactly what we need, someone who will do what is right even when it is dangerous, someone who inspires loyalty in others, and someone who cannot be bought or intimidated into abandoning their principles." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "But, most importantly, you were chosen because you possess something that our sensors detected even before we met, a latent psychic potential that even you are not aware of. It is weak by ethereal standards, but it exists. And, with proper training, it may be enough to allow you to serve as a bridge between our species." Marcus felt as if the deck had shifted beneath his feet. "Psychic potential? That's impossible. I've never shown any signs of dash. You rescued me from that slave market not because of any logical analysis, but because something deep inside you recognized what I truly was," Lyrelii interrupted gently. "You felt the call of my mind to yours, even through the dampening field they had placed around my cage. That is not coincidence, Marcus Chen. That is destiny." Before Marcus could respond, the communication console chimed with an incoming transmission. The face that appeared on the screen was not human or any species he recognized. It was eerily beautiful, with features that seemed to shift and flow like liquid light. This was a full-blooded ethereal, one of the survivors who had been hiding throughout the galaxy. "Princess Lyrelii," the being said in a voice like singing crystals. "The fleet awaits your orders. Shall we proceed to the next phase?" Lyrelii straightened, and, suddenly, Marcus could see the weight of command settle on her shoulders like a mantle. "Begin the liberation of the outer colonies. Target systems with minimal military presence but maximum symbolic value. We want the galaxy to know we have returned, but we are not yet ready for full-scale confrontation with their main battle fleets. As you command, Your Highness." "What of the human vessel?" Lyrelii glanced at Marcus before responding. "The Wandering Star will accompany the fleet as our first human allies. Ensure they are given full access to fleet communications and tactical data. They have much to learn, and we have much to teach." The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in contemplative silence. Around them, the ethereal fleet was already beginning to move, their ships gracefully shifting into formation for departure. The captured hegemony vessels were being towed along, their crews still unconscious but alive. "Captain," Zara said quietly. "Are we really doing this? Are we really about to help start a galactic war?" Marcus looked out at the alien ships surrounding them, each one representing technology and power beyond human comprehension. Then, he looked at Lyrelii, no longer seeing the fragile slave girl he had rescued but the princess of an ancient empire that had returned from the dead. "Yeah," he said finally. "I think we are." As the fleet entered hyperspace, beginning their journey toward the next target system, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that they were crossing a threshold from which there would be no return. Behind them lay everything they had known, a galaxy where humanity survived as second-class citizens under hegemony rule. Ahead lay uncertainty, war, and the slim possibility of something better. But, as he watched Lyralii coordinating with her fellow ethereals, planning strategies that would reshape the political landscape of the entire galaxy, Marcus realized that for the first time in his life, he was part of something truly important. Something that might actually make a difference. The age of hegemony domination was ending. The age of ethereal restoration had begun. And, somehow, against all odds, humanity was going to play a crucial role in what happened next. 6 months had passed since the liberation of Kethvar Prime, and the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. What had begun as a small rebellion had exploded into a full-scale revolution that spread across hundreds of star systems. The ethereal restoration fleet had grown from a hidden armada to a massive alliance of liberated worlds, each eager to throw off the chains of hegemony oppression. Marcus stood on the bridge of the Wandering Star, but his ship was no longer the humble merchant vessel it had once been. Ethereal technology had transformed it into something unprecedented, a hybrid craft that combined human ingenuity with alien science. The hull gleamed with crystalline additions that enhanced both its defensive capabilities and its psychic resonance. Where once it had carried cargo, it now housed a crew of 50, including humans, liberated aliens, and 3 ethereal advisors who were helping Marcus develop his latent psychic abilities. The biggest change, however, was not in the ship but in its captain. Marcus had discovered that Lyralii's assessment of his psychic potential had been conservative. Over the past months, working with ethereal teachers, he had developed abilities that bordered on the incredible. He could sense the emotions and thoughts of his crew across vast distances, coordinate complex battle strategies through mental links, and even influence the behavior of enemy forces during combat. But it was what he had accomplished with those abilities that truly mattered. Captain called Lieutenant Vera Santos his new communications officer. She was a former hegemony defector, one of thousands who had joined the revolution when they realized there was finally hope for change. We're receiving confirmation from the Tau Ceti Liberation Front. The orbital defense platforms have been neutralized. Marcus nodded, his enhanced senses already telling him what his instruments would confirm moments later. Through the psychic network that connected all ships in the ethereal fleet, he could feel the triumph and relief of the liberation forces as another hegemony stronghold fell to their advancing alliance. Excellent, he said. Signal the fleet, begin Phase 2 of the operation. On the main view screen, they could see the results of their campaign. The planet Zirion had been a major hegemony military base, its surface covered with weapons factories and training facilities that had supplied the oppression of a dozen nearby systems. Now those facilities were being systematically dismantled by liberation forces, while the planet's original inhabitants, a peaceful aquatic species called the Velani, emerged from hiding for the first time in decades. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" said Lyralii, who had materialized beside Marcus with the silent grace that all ethereals seemed to possess. Over the past months, she had grown into her role as supreme commander of the liberation forces, but she still made time to personally oversee operations involving human crews. Marcus looked at her and felt his breath catch, as it did every time he saw her now. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was any pretense of frailty or weakness. Lyralii stood tall and proud, radiating confidence and power. Her violet eyes blazed with the fire of someone who had reclaimed her birthright, and her silver hair moved as if stirred by invisible winds. She wore robes that seemed to be woven from starlight itself, and, when she moved, reality bent slightly around her presence. But it wasn't just her appearance that had changed. Lyralii had grown into her role as the leader of the greatest liberation movement the galaxy had ever seen. Under her command, the ethereal forces had accomplished the impossible, they had given hope to the hopeless and turned the tide of a war that had been lost for centuries. "It is beautiful," Marcus agreed, though he wasn't looking at the planet. "How many is that now?" 47 systems liberated, Lyralii replied with satisfaction. "Over 200 worlds freed from hegemony control. But, more importantly, we've proven that they can be defeated. Word is spreading faster than our ships can travel. Rebellions are breaking out in sectors we haven't even reached yet." Marcus felt a surge of pride, followed immediately by apprehension. "Which means they're going to hit back soon, and hard." Lyralii nodded gravely. Our intelligence suggests they are gathering their full strength for a massive counterattack. Every ship they can spare, every weapon they can deploy. They know that if we continue to succeed, their entire empire will collapse within a year. Do we have the strength to face them? That, Lyralii said with a smile that was equal parts confident and mysterious, depends on whether humanity is ready to fulfill its true potential. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. On the tactical display, massive energy signatures were appearing at the edge of the system. One by one, hegemony warships dropped out of hyperspace, their numbers growing by the minute. Fleet composition analysis complete, reported his tactical officer, Commander Sarah Kim. We're looking at over 3,000 heavy warships, including 12 super dreadnoughts. It's the largest fleet movement in recorded history. Marcus felt his stomach drop. The Liberation Forces had perhaps 800 ships, and, while their technology was superior, they were still vastly outnumbered. This was the moment he had been dreading, the decisive battle that would determine the fate of the revolution. All ships, battle stations, he ordered, his voice carrying across the psychic network to every vessel in the Liberation Fleet. This is what we've been preparing for. But, as the hegemony armada continued to grow in size, Marcus began to wonder if all their preparation would be enough. The voice that responded to his doubts came from everywhere and, nowhere, carried on wavelengths that transcended physical space. It was Lyralii, but, not just Lyralii, it was the combined consciousness of every ethereal in the fleet, speaking as one. Marcus Chen of Earth, the voice said, and, suddenly, he was no longer standing on his bridge but, in a vast space filled with swirling galaxies and, dancing lights. The time has come for humanity to take its place among the stars. But, first, you must understand what you truly are. Images flooded Marcus's mind, not his memories, but, something far older. He saw Earth as it had been millions of years ago, before humanity had evolved, before intelligence had emerged from the primitive ancestors of his species. And, he saw visitors, tall, graceful beings with violet eyes and silver hair, walking among the early hominids with obvious purpose. We were explorers then, Lyralii's voice explained as the images continued. Seekers of knowledge and beauty. When we found your world, we were fascinated by the potential we sensed in your ancestors. They were unique among the species we had encountered, adaptable, resilient, capable of growth beyond what their physical forms suggested. The images shifted, showing the ethereals working with early humans, teaching them, guiding their development. Not controlling or dominating, but nurturing the spark of something special. We gave your species a gift, the voice continued. The same gift we possessed, the ability to touch the fundamental forces that bind the universe together. But, your people were not ready for such power, so we made it dormant, waiting for the day when humanity would be mature enough to wield it responsibly. Marcus felt understanding dawn like sunrise in his mind. You're saying that humans are part ethereal? Not part, Lyralii corrected. Humanity is what we might have become, given different circumstances. You are our children in the truest sense, not through biology, but through potential. And, now, as the galaxy faces its darkest hour, that potential must be awakened. The vision space around Marcus began to change, and, suddenly, he was back on his bridge. But, something was different. He could sense his crew not just as individuals, but as components of something larger. Their minds were linked to his, and, through him, to every other human in the Liberation Fleet. And, beyond the fleet, he could feel something even more incredible. Across the galaxy, on thousands of worlds where humans had settled or worked or lived as refugees, he sensed minds beginning to stir. Dormant abilities that had slept for millennia were awakening, triggered by the psychic resonance of the Liberation Fleet. By the stars, whispered Dr. Nakamura from her station. I can feel them. All of them. Every human in the galaxy. Marcus realized she was right. Through the expanding psychic network, he could sense human minds coming online across hundreds of light years. Miners on distant asteroids, colonists on frontier worlds, even prisoners in hegemony labor camps, all of them suddenly, connected by invisible threads of consciousness. And, they were angry. For centuries, humanity had suffered under alien rule, treated as second-class citizens at best and property at worst. They had endured because they had no choice, because resistance seemed futile against such overwhelming power. But, now, suddenly, they had something they had never possessed before, the ability to fight back on equal terms. All human vessels, Marcus broadcast, his words carried not by radio but by pure thought across the galaxy. This is Captain Marcus Chen of the Liberation Fleet. You felt the awakening. You know what it means. The time has come to stand up and be counted. The response was immediate and overwhelming. On every world where humans lived, machinery began to malfunction as workers with newly awakened psychic abilities sabotaged hegemony operations. Ships that had been pressed into hegemony service suddenly turned on their escorts. Prison camps that had held humans for decades found their security systems mysteriously failing as guards discovered their minds no longer obeyed their own commands. But, most importantly, the hundreds of human vessels scattered throughout the hegemony fleet began to change sides. Marcus watched on the tactical display as ship after ship sent signals indicating their defection. Not all of them, many human crews remained loyal to the hegemony out of fear or conditioning. But, enough changed allegiance to throw the enemy fleet into chaos. Impossible, came War Commander Theklan's voice over the communication channels. Security teams to all human quarters immediately. We are experiencing coordinated mutiny across the entire fleet. The hegemony commander's panic was understandable. In the space of minutes, his overwhelming numerical advantage had been cut nearly in half as human crews either defected or disabled their own ships rather than fight against the liberation forces. But, the real surprise was yet to come. Marcus, Lyralii said, her voice now speaking directly into his mind. Look to the edge of the system. He turned his attention to the long-range sensors and gasped. New ships were arriving, not ethereal vessels or captured hegemony craft, but something entirely different. These were human ships, but not like any he had ever seen. They were elegant and powerful, combining human engineering principles with what appeared to be advanced psychic technology. Where did they come from? He asked in amazement. Hidden shipyards, Lyralii replied with obvious satisfaction. Secret facilities that have been under construction for decades, built by humans who never forgot the dream of freedom. They were waiting for this moment, for the awakening that would give them the power to use what they had built. More and more ships continued to arrive, emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation. Marcus realized that what he was seeing represented the largest human fleet in history, hundreds of vessels crewed by humans whose psychic abilities had been awakened and trained in secret. Attention, Liberation Forces, came a new voice over the communication channels. This is Admiral Sarah Mitchell of the Free Earth Navy. We've been waiting a long time for this fight. Request permission to join the battle line. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face as the implications hit him. This wasn't just a rebellion anymore, this was humanity claiming its rightful place among the stars. The species that had been dismissed as primitive, conquered and enslaved, was revealing itself to be something far greater than anyone had imagined. Permission granted, Admiral, he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Welcome to the revolution. The battle that followed was unlike anything in recorded history. The hegemony forces, despite their numerical superiority and advanced technology, found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to anticipate their every move. Human psychics coordinated tactics across vast distances, while ethereal leaders provided strategic guidance that transcended normal spacetime limitations. But, it was the sheer determination of the liberation forces that proved decisive. These were beings who had suffered under oppression for generations, who had finally been given the power to fight back against their tormentors. They fought not just for victory, but for vindication, for the right to exist as free beings in a galaxy that had tried to enslave them. The turning point came when Marcus, guided by Lyralii's instructions, managed to establish a psychic link with War Commander Theklan himself. For the first time in his life, the brutal hegemony commander found his mind invaded by memories and emotions that were not his own. He experienced firsthand the suffering his forces had inflicted, felt the pain of every enslaved world, understood the true cost of the empire he had served so faithfully. The psychological shock was devastating. Across the hegemony fleet, commanders and crew members found their certainty shattered as human psychics forced them to confront the reality of their actions. Ships that had fought with savage efficiency just moments before began to surrender en masse as their crews lost the will to continue the fight. When the battle finally ended, the liberation forces had achieved complete victory. The largest military force in hegemony history had been defeated not through superior firepower, but through the awakening of humanity's true potential and the moral courage to use it responsibly. Marcus stood on his bridge, surrounded by his crew, and looked out at a galaxy that had been forever changed. The revolution was no longer spreading world by world, it was cascading across entire sectors as news of the victory spread. The hegemony's grip on power was crumbling, and, in its place, something new and wonderful was emerging. "So what happens now?" he asked Lyralii, who was studying the tactical displays with obvious satisfaction. "Now," she replied, "we build something better. A galactic confederation where all species are truly equal, where power is shared rather than hoarded, where the mistakes of the past are not repeated." She turned to face him, and Marcus saw in her violet eyes a future filled with infinite possibility. "But, first, we have a galaxy to liberate. And, thanks to humanity's awakening, we finally have the strength to do it properly." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. Somewhere in the slave markets of HFY Prime, he had been just another merchant trying to make an honest living. Now he was a leader in the greatest liberation movement the galaxy had ever seen, commanding abilities he never could have imagined. But, as he looked at Lyralii, no longer the fragile princess he had rescued, but the strong leader who had guided them all to this moment, he realized that the most important change was not in his abilities or his position. It was in the fact that for the first time in his life, he was part of something that mattered. Something that would echo through history long after he was gone. The human claimed this seemingly frail alien princess. Now she marched at the head of galactic forces that would reshape the universe. And humanity marched beside her, no longer slaves or second-class citizens, but partners in building a better tomorrow for all the children of the stars.